The first so-called debate is in the books. Let's find out what happened in between what the candidates were saying. Plus, Medicaid's back in the news. All coming up. Mitchell Talks, the News 9 Sessions, is next. All right, you covered this. Good morning.
Good morning. Good seeing you.
You covered this debate. It was a snoozer, okay? I mean, it was a real snoozer, but at least there was something that we could hear. I'm just not sure many people saw it or heard it.
To call it a debate is debatable. It was the paper billed it as a conversation with the gubernatorial candidates, and it was only the primary gubernatorial candidates, Republican and Democrat, Kevin Stitt and Drew Edmondson. They did not bring in the Libertarian candidate. He was outside. We talked with him also, but they covered a number of different points, but a lot of these were points that have already been covered. I don't think there were any real hard questions that were asked. I didn't walk away learning anything new. For people who aren't overly engaged in politics, it probably was to their advantage to hear some of these basics. They talked a lot about education reform and went over like 1010XX, for example. Kevin Stitt defended his opposition to 1010XX. That was the funding mechanism for the teacher pay raise. It wasn't the pay raise. His argument was he was in favor of the pay raise. He was not in favor of the way that it was funded.
It was tying it to unsustainable revenue. It was just going to put a Band-Aid on this problem, Chris. So we have got to fix the funding formula to start encouraging local counties to do more, local school districts to do more. Because right now, if we raise $1 extra in Jinx or Union or Bartlesville, they don't get to keep that dollar. They get subtracted through the state equalization formula. So we've got to start incentivizing, looking how other states fund to actually fix this long term.
It's kind of the little bit pregnant thing, right? I mean, I was before it, before I was again it.
Right.
It just makes. By the way, I'm gonna tell you, the loser was in this situation, the sound guy. But, you know, when you've got print folks doing something, you need to understand. You need to mic them up right. Is that right? I mean, mic them up correctly, for heaven's sakes. Castile's a pro. I could barely hear him for the way they had him mic'd up. All right, we'll move on from that. The Edmondson has been a little bit more forthcoming on what he wants to do.
Right.
And we talked last week, when Herms was here, who's out today, I hope he feels better. The point was, is the media going to start drilling down into what Kevin Stitt is for? And that didn't happen.
Well, we did afterwards. He was up on stage, and in typical Stitt fashion, he said over and over again, well, I've got a plan for this, and I've got a plan for that. And he talks about his plan, but he never really articulates what exactly that plan is. So pinned him down afterwards, and it appears what the plan is he's saying no new taxes under a Stitt administration, but then in the same breath, he's saying that he's going to shift a lot of that tax burden to counties and municipalities. So you're still going to see an increase in taxes. It's just not going to be state taxes. Personally, my wallet doesn't know the difference. An increase in taxes is an increase in taxes. We talked with Drew Edmondson further. He further articulated what his plan was, the same one that he's been talking about, raising gross production to 7%, doing away with the capital gains exemption, and raising the price of cigarettes to 50 cents a pack.
Well, if the legislature won't do it, we may have to submit them to a vote of the people, and I'm prepared to do that, but not all of them require the 75%. Part of my tax package certainly would, and that's getting the other 50 cents on a pack of cigarettes.
And the gross production tax.
Gross production tax, I'm not certain that it does or not, because it would be repealing a prior cut in the tax rate. So, you know, lawyers may argue about whether that is doing away with an exemption or a benefit, or whether it's a tax increase.
At some point, the Edmondson people are going to be annoyed by the amount of attention on his plan and the fact that, frankly, the media is letting Mr. Stitt get away without really drilling down, present company excluded. This is going to, listen, the media is going to have to step up on this, all right? And we had something happen this week. We know the Oklahoman's been sold to a hedge fund-backed company that comes in, strips down the newspapers, the veterans leave, we know what happens. It's like out of Wall Street, the movie, right? Yeah. They come in, they buy it, they clean house, and then they
turn around and sell it.
That's exactly what happened. So this was the swan song. Here's the irony. In 2018, there will have been more debates or conversations done with NonDoc, a digital program, than with News OK. I mean, if that's not a microcosm of what's happening in journalism, I don't know.
It's a paradigm shift.
Let me ask you this. How can, with these sorts of things happening, can Oklahoma media actually do a good job of holding Mr. Stitt and Mr. Edmondson accountable for what they're saying in these so-called conversations.
We have to. We have to. Just because you're shorter staffed, and I get it, we're all short staffed right now. We could all use more people, but it's not that difficult to ask that one question and keep on hammering it. When I approached Kevin Stitt, I had to approach him after the debate, quote unquote, behind the stage, and said to him, "What's your plan?" And he said, "Well, I've got a plan." No, what specifically is your plan? How much money are we talking about? And I still haven't really gotten an answer on that. Exactly how much money are we talking about? How much are we going to need? He talks about the $1.1 billion in additional revenues that the state is bringing in. Depending upon who you ask, that could be anywhere from $800 million to $1 billion. But if he's talking about in the first year giving teachers more of a raise, I don't see how you're going to pull that off and fix roads and bridges and take care of the long list of other issues that we have.
Well, let's talk about Medicaid. This is an issue that has been going on for 8 years, and the current governor the media really never held her feet to the fire on this one. We've got the Pauls Valley situation. We know there's a domino effect. Edmondson's point on this.
Edmondson says specifically, this is our money, we should access it, period.
And I believe with what's happening as we speak in Pauls Valley, trying to keep their hospital open with a GoFundMe program, and other hospitals that have already closed, the number of Oklahomans that would be covered by an expansion, and the fact that the $900+ million, we call them federal funds, but those are our tax dollars that have gone to Washington that we're wanting to get back. Injecting that into the economy will create more than enough revenue to offset the 10% match in order to get that done.
Now, Stitt, on the other hand, he still opposes Medicaid expansion. He says it's just not something that the state wants to get involved in right now.
You're right. I mean, I want every federal dollar I can get into my state for roads and bridges, for health care, for all that. But I don't want to expand and put my state in a situation that's going to be harmful, years from now.
So what's your take? Should we take it or should we not?
Well, here's what I would say. I would say that this conversation about if we take the Medicaid money, we're tied down the road. The way it was originally done, you could opt out. You could take the money up front, and then if the state portion started becoming untenable, which was going to happen, okay? But the states could get out of it.
Right. But
that conversation hasn't happened.
It's important to say just how much money we're talking about here. We're talking about a $100 million investment by the state and a $900 million investment coming into the state from the federal government. So we're not talking chump change here. We're talking big money.
And we're talking about people who are not really drilling down into this. Again, present company excluded. There was also prison reform on the issue. And some of the stuff that Mr. Edmondson said, and I'm still to this point now, I keep hearing these so-called reformers going, well, these low-level, I want a number. And somebody give me a number.
Right.
Here is Mr. Edmondson's quote on what he would do on crimes that are no longer felonies.
You take people who are serving time for something that's no longer a felony, particularly a simple possession of drugs, and ask the Pardon and Parole Board to send the governor those names.
The problem is what he's saying there really can't be done. The way 788 is worded, it can't be done retroactively.
I don't know. I'd have to think through. It's not applied retroactively, and there's no way to make it apply retroactively unless you pass a statute saying so. But I would at least take the course that I'm planning to take and worry about that down the road.
So let's take that quote there. You take people who are serving time for something that's no longer felony and ask the Pardon and Parole Board to send the governor those names. I want to know how many. Is it the sort of stuff that's going to lower the numbers inside of our prisons? I want to hear some numbers.
Yep. And again, you're oftentimes within the prison population, you're not just seeing somebody who's in there only for marijuana. They're usually in there for marijuana and burglary, or marijuana and robbery, or any number of different things. So how do you separate that? I mean, they might be able to knock some of the time off, but I don't know if it's going to have a dramatic effect. But you're right. We don't know. We haven't seen any numbers yet. That, I think, is what Edmondson is asking for. He's saying, show me the numbers, show me how many people, and let's go on from there. Stitt says that his idea is to have more, and he's right about this, more uniformity when it comes to sentencing from county to county.
I see some counties just with horrendously long sentences, other counties fraction of the amounts. I think fairness in sentencing across all counties. looking at the nonviolent drug offenders and getting them better help earlier on. We have to get more rehab and facilities and drug courts and really give them an opportunity instead of these long sentences.
I don't know how much more you have to do to say, Mr. DA, meet me in the parking lot and let's go at it, okay? Because that's, I see counties with some horrendously long sentences, others a fraction of the amount. Again, what does the data say? Right. I mean, I'm interested in the details about this.
But his point, it's a valid point. A lot of times the DA's offices, the way they're funded is through the fees and fines that are imposed when somebody is prosecuted. So if they're not prosecuting as many people, they're not paid as much. So there's a financial incentive for them to continue doing exactly what they're doing. It's a valid point.
And it's something that we're not talking enough about. I mean, we want to invite the DAs to get into that, and well, they'll get into it, no doubt about that.
We also talked a lot about private prisons. Edmondson says he wants to wean the state off of privately owned prisons by reducing the inmate population. Stitt says no. He sounds very Trumpian when he says this. We have to renegotiate the contracts with the private prisons.
We've got to be very careful when you negotiate a contract that it doesn't ratchet up. You don't guarantee a certain amount of beds are full.
And again, makes a very good point there. What he's talking about is this profit motive that we have for keeping more people incarcerated. And when you're dealing with a profit motive like that, it's difficult to change that mindset. We spoke with Chris Powell. He's the Libertarian candidate. He says closing those private prisons, much easier said than done.
You know, those private prisons, they do have their profit motive. They do have their shareholders to answer to. And they are going to continue doing what they have been doing, which is contributing to politicians, legislators, and that kind of thing. So that's one of the opponents to reducing the incarceration rate. They may not say that, but you know, they're also looking at their bottom line.
Please note that we've included the Libertarian in this discussion.
Yeah.
Which didn't happen the other night in that first snooze fest. But I will have to tell you, he's making a good point here.
He's absolutely right. And I talked with Chris Powell. We do a weekly discussion with both Edmondson and Stitt. We're going to start including Libertarian candidate Chris Powell in that as well. It's important his voice is heard too.
It sure is, and glad that you're doing that. Thank you. That's, by the way, that hashtag journalism there, which is like get all of those points out there. So the ads, which we saw in the primary, in the runoff, we saw some ads outpacing journalism in terms of getting information to people. The ads have started.
The ads have started. We've all seen that barn ad already, and that was the topic of this discussion that the Oklahoman had with the candidates.
Edmondson will continue his work, decimating Oklahoma's farmers and ranchers.
The most worthless barn I've ever seen. No road leading up to it or leading up.
Now, I thought that worked very well for Drew Edmondson. He really showed some personality there. And while we were there, we noticed there were a lot more Edmondson supporters than there were Stitt supporters. That was probably by design. It was limited to a certain amount of tickets. It seems like a lot of his supporters immediately got in on the ground floor, that we saw a lot of educators that were there at the time. And pretty much anything that he would say or do, any points that he would make, there was laughter in all the right places, there was applause in all the right places. So it really made it appear as though he had the upper hand in this.
It was like a laugh track in some areas, and I thought maybe the most effective soundbite of the evening was when they were talking about sentencing reform, and he said to Mr. Castile, I'll get back to you on it. And there was a lot of laughter. Frankly, people were laughing at him, Mr. Stitt, that is.
Right.
And by the way, when you look at this overall and you look at the performances, there are some others coming, and broadcasters are going to be involved in the next ones that are coming up. What do the candidates need to do to sharpen their communication skills with the public? Because there was a lot of gray area. There was a lot of follow-up questions that didn't happen. And I will say this about Chris. I mean, Chris was by himself.
Yeah.
I think when you start doing debates and you do conversations, you got to have more than one person.
Yeah.
I mean, that's print trying to do broadcast, and that is glaringly an error in that situation.
And Chris is a smart guy, and he knows the issues. He knows them very well. And he did challenge the candidates a couple of different times, but I think
he was by himself.
Yeah, he was by himself. He couldn't play off of anyone else like you and I are doing right now. He couldn't play off of anyone else, but more importantly, I don't think that he was given the time necessary to do all the follow-up questions. Oftentimes when they put these things together, they time it out in such a way that question, answer, question, answer, question, but no room for follow-up. And that's where a lot of these guys are able to slip through.
Well, when you're doing a broadcast debate, it's good to have broadcasters. Just a thought for you guys in the print business. When Trey Savage does his debates, who's up on the stage with him? Well, you've been in 2 or 3 of those.
Oh, more than that.
And absolutely. So there's print people, there are radio people. Well, there's not much radio left in Oklahoma, but there is NPR. And then you have broadcasters. Right. If you're going to have a debate, after all of these years, going back to Nixon and Kennedy, media still has difficulty trying to get the formats right. And this format was a loser.
It was a bad format. And the whole conversation with the candidates, fireside chat, that's all interesting, I guess, but I wanted to see them go at each other a little bit. I wanted to see them address each other. And that's one place where I believe that this debate failed.
Yeah, and here's an idea for the management in print, and we see what's happening there. Civil discourse, it's not what sells. Now, maybe the rules are going to change. Did you watch what was happening this week in Washington? I mean, the civil discourse thing, it's kind of like waiting for or pining for the days of stagecoaches. Right. I mean, it's done deal. If you're going to get your messages out, you got to go digital. You got to use digital processes, and you've got to think like what people are thinking. And by the way, this is where they get their news, okay? We know that here at News 9. Yep. You've got to be able to turn these into sound bites. Okay, let's go to the go-to, the cleanup hitter, every one of these, marijuana.
Pot.
Okay? Pot. And here we go. To be blunt about it.
Blunt.
Yes. We have to tell folks. We talked about the seed problem last week, the Jim Stafford story we did on Your Vote Counts. The first medical marijuana, what was that, plant or
Plants.
seeds? The first ones were sold Wednesday.
First seedling was sold on Wednesday. It was purchased by a Vietnam War era veteran. He suffers with PTSD. Guy's name is John Frazier. He's been a big proponent of medical marijuana for quite some time now. He wanted to be the guy who purchased the first one. There's still some question as to whether or not he did it legally. The way that 788 is phrased, it says that product cannot be sold until October 26th, so we've still got a month to go on this. He paid $100 to get to be the first person to purchase it. His argument is it's not really product because he can't smoke it yet. It's just a seedling. He's got another 30 to 45 days before this thing starts budding. But he was the first to purchase it.
I didn't think it was going to happen in my lifetime, and that's what's so really great about this. Is that's why we did the sale. We wanted everybody to know that yes, cannabis is for sale here in Oklahoma. Cannabis is for sale.
Now here's what's interesting. That seedling was grown either from seeds that were originally grown here or from seeds that were brought from outside of the state. The problem with that is that either one is illegal by federal law. It's illegal to bring seeds or plants over state lines. Federal law does not recognize medicinal benefits of marijuana. And if it was seeds that were holdovers from before 788 was passed, then they're illegal. So one way or another, this plant was grown illegally.
To the extent federal law does conflict with what the voters of the citizens told their legislators to do, we're going to ignore it, and we're going to do what the citizens told us to do.
It's just sort of like this. In the old days, whenever we had before liquor by the drink, you would take your booze into a club, and they would give you a setup for $97. Mm-hmm. Okay, your mixers. Are we back there?
I think we're back there.
Okay.
And I think it's just a matter of time. The legislature is still working on these rules and regulations. They met for their 10th meeting this past week. From this point out, they're done with the information gathering aspect of it, and now they're going to get into the rulemaking aspect. But it's one of those deals where it's kind of like the horse is already out of the barn. They've already sold the first plant, and the regulations still aren't fully in place for this.
Okay, so who's going to play John Wayne about putting the horse in the barn? John Eccles. Our friend, Your Vote Counts, the leader, he's trying to make peace with these two groups out here. Mm-hmm. He's one of the co-chairs of this group that's meeting. I also warn folks or caution them about going into no man's land because you get shot from both sides. But Leader Eccles says he's going to try to do something about it.
Right, and he's walking into this with the right attitude. He's walking into this with the attitude that the people who voted on this overwhelmingly passed 788. Medical marijuana is the law of the land now. Now the next question is, how do we distribute it? What they worked on this past Friday was ways to make sure that it's being grown properly, to make sure that it's tested properly, to make sure there aren't certain heavy metals that are in the soil. So it's not an effort to try to make medical marijuana not happen. Medical marijuana is happening right now.
Please note that he put heavy metal and marijuana in the same phrase. I don't think we're talking about AC/DC here.
We're not.
Right?
I was.
Okay, but so we're talking about Enter Sandman or something like that. All right, so coming up. Next week, we'll talk a little bit about this and then talk about next week. There's another poll out by a polling firm that's really new to the scene showing that's about a 4-point race, which would be basically still a dead even sort of heat. Also, they're saying that not many people are interested in state questions. We're going to take a look at that. What else have you got on the agenda for next week?
Well, obviously, we're going to be talking more about how close this race is. And one thing to note from this debate, again, for want of a better term, we kind of went into it knowing that at this point, neither one of the candidates are going to be taking shots at each other. I don't expect that's going to happen for the rest of the debate. You're not going to see the camps of either attacking the other, I don't think, because right now they're vying for this 6% of the undecideds, which isn't even really worth trying to go after at this point. What they're going to be doing is energizing their own base. They're going to be doing that through their own messages. Now, that said, these dark money campaigns are going to be taking out more of these attack ads. And we saw another one come out this past week.
Which ties Mr. Stitt to the current governor.
To Governor Fallon, right?
We were wondering when that was going to happen, and so it's happening now.
And a pretty effective piece. I think it's going to get a little bit dirtier from the dark money, but I don't think you're going to see individual camps necessarily attacking one another.
All right, so unlike the barn that Mr. Edmondson was talking about, our barn does have roads leading to it. Follow me, Scott Mitchell, on Twitter, @MitchellTalks. You can go to news9.com/YourVoteCounts for everything we're doing there with Mr. Dunnington, Mr. Eccles, and you follow Mr. Brillback on Twitter. And on you're the Facebook guy.
I'm a Facebook guy. I just can't get into the Twitter thing.
And if Grant Herms ever comes back, we'll tell you how to find him. Right now, we hope he's feeling much better.
We can't even find him.
I don't know where he's at. Kids, what are we going to do about him? Thanks for watching. See you next week.